Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Looking Deeper with Reverend Sandra Herrick and yours truly, Dana King Francisco. Welcome to Spiritual Aging. And for those of you that are out there that would like to join us in the chat room is open. Come on in, join in the conversation, and thank you for listening wherever you happen to be around Grandmother Earth. Welcome. Hey, Sandy Herrick.
Hey, Dana. Happy birthday to you.
And you.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to say hello to everybody. I've been gone for 2 months.
Well, this is the first time we've been together for a couple of months.
It is the first time we've been together for a couple of months. That's kind of shocking. That's way too long.
It is. I've missed us.
I do too. It's like, oh, there she is. So a lot has happened in these 2 months. And if I may, I would like to first and foremost say happy birthday to you. But also I want our listeners around the world to know that the first reason I was not with us in September was because I was just exhausted. I was saturated, just saturated. And saturated because Bobby went into the hospital. As you may know, he was diagnosed with leukemia, terminal leukemia, and he ended up going into the hospital for a stem cell transplant, a bone marrow transplant. And just when I couldn't take it anymore, he was still in the hospital. And I want to thank you all for your support. And today we literally, in the past week, have been given the notice that Bobby is in remission completely. He has completely 95% absorbed his transplant, and it's a new day. Bobby is alive and free of cancer. So the future is him recovering, him getting used to this genie in a bottle that he has become. And the other month in October, why I wasn't here was because it was my birthday. I turned 75. So catching you all up, and here we go. And the future is bright, and it will certainly be something to behold. So thank you all for your support and your love and your faith in getting us all through. And to you, Dana, and the crew, Lily, and you're out there. Without your prayers, I don't think I would have made it. It doesn't matter what happened to Bobby.
Well,
I needed them. So thank you.
You're welcome. That's great news. Something to be so grateful for on so many levels. So thank you for sharing that with us, Sandy.
And the eve of Thanksgiving, we have a lot to be thankful for. So
we do.
So here we are. Here we are on the other side of a lot.
Mm-hmm. We were just talking about how long we've known each other, and we figure it's been about 14 years.
Yeah.
Which seems just about right. 14 years. Mm-hmm. And think about that. Oh, my goodness.
In a flash.
And
in a flash.
It really relates to the topic for tonight, spiritual aging. And, you and I always talk before we do a podcast. We don't do things off the cuff when it comes to the podcast. What was it about that subject that called to you, Sandy?
Well, we both hit mile markers.
We did.
You hitting 60, me hitting 75. And when I turned 60, I just got married. So it was a landmark. And what really came up for me is also in knowing that you faced all sorts of things this year. I faced all sorts of things this year. And experience ages us, not just our years. Situations age us. We get honed by it. We get grilled by it. We get pummeled by it. We get elevated by it. And so I want to be able to talk about how do we age spiritually, not just from getting older and acquiring the wisdom, but going through situations that challenge us at maybe too young of an age, that makes us grow up faster, things that challenge us, that demand that we sometimes stay young so that we can still stay innocent. And I think most importantly, how do we acquire wisdom in our aging and utilize it, wear it? And I think that for me as a woman, in my class last night in Touchstones, one of the things I was talking about in acquiring wisdom was that wisdom has an ancientness to it. It has a crustation to it. It has, lots of hair or bald. It's like, braids or beads and clothes that just have texture. And wisdom has a grit. So that's what came up for me, and I want everybody to know it's something that we acquire, we earn, and we're demanded to go through if we're lucky, even though it hurts. How about you?
Well, I think that's brilliant. The thing that occurred to me when I was thinking about the topic and really ruminating about it is how our spirituality ages. Mm-hmm. And our perceptions of spirit and what spirituality is. And what this journey is all about for us as individuals. I think as we get older, we tend to go more within rather than looking to serve outside of ourselves as broadly as maybe we did when we were younger. Yes. And feeling responsible for everyone else's spirituality. And the day comes when we understand that we really need to focus on our own understanding and path of spirituality. Yes. So all of those thoughts came up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's beautiful because I know that there's, every 10 years, every 5 years, who I was at 10, who I was at 20. That's just 10 years. 10 to 20 is only 10 years. And that feels like impossible to even truly comprehend when you think 50 to 60 is just a giddy up and a hitch.
Yeah.
But I mean, how much we develop in that 10 years, from 10 to 20, it's the beginning of a speed that I don't think anybody that's growing up knows that starts to happen. It takes forever to get to 20, and it takes 3 days and a wink to get to 75 from there.
That's a really good analogy. What. Yeah, you're right about that. We always say, where did that time go? Or time is really flying. And it does go by much more quickly. And I think that for many of us, the value that we place on time and the meatiness of time, what we're doing with our time, who we're spending our time with, changes.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you, Sandy, first. In talking about who you spend your time with, how has that evolved over your life?
Well, that's a spectacular question and an incredible scenario to be able to describe, because as I grew, my familiars, my classmates, my social group from being in high school to even just 20 changed radically. And then my group from 20 to 25 really took a turn because my social group from high school went to college. I went to New York, marriage, people got pregnant, had babies. And I got married, but I got divorced and I didn't have children. So I didn't belong to that framework of staying at home, getting married and taking on being a parent. That group is still in my peripheral. They're on Facebook. I can chat with them, but they're no longer the people that hold the weight of my life with me. Now And I say that out of the respect of the amount of life they lived by being parents and now grandparents, and the difference of the weight in my life by being somebody who's traveled the world, literally has adopted thousands of children. And I mean that with all the humility and respect of all the children that I have dealt with around the world, and the mothers that were children when I met them 30 years ago that now have children that are now coming to me as, for wisdom, for support. The weight of it is, there's a texture, there's a gratitude, and there's a necessity, like with you, to have the capacity to talk about the depth of my soul, the expanse of my spirituality, and also the privacy of it on some level. My life is very, very big, and yet my circle's very, very small. How about you?
Hmm. Yeah. It's interesting in that how can I say this? Growing up in a military family, there was no steady course of anything for very long. Maybe on a good day, 3 years, 3-year stint somewhere. And other than Kelly Spencer having a lifelong friend, she is my lifelong friend. And, then coming here to Michigan, Darlene is also a lifelong friend. And family has a very different definition for me because once again, growing up in a military family, you're not at grandma's house every Sunday for roast beef and mashed potatoes. And, I was thinking about this question before the show tonight, and one of the things that has remained most constant for me is my circle of spirit.
Yes.
My guides in spirit, angels and saints. Those have been the most steadfast for the longest period of time and always at my side, if that makes any sense.
Oh my God, yes. And I regret I didn't include that because that was like, my spiritual friends. Yeah, that started in my 20s and they're still with me to today.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
The faces that I drew at 12 years old of the spirits that would come to visit me, they've remained at my side. And those of the ancestors that, I drew their faces in 7th grade because they came to me and they've been very steadfast at my side. I think one of the most profound pieces of spiritual aging is that some things in our life don't age well.
Right.
Like organized religion.
Right.
Organized religion has not aged well for me in my life. And it becomes, more bitter by the day, just when I read the news.
Right.
What are some of the things in your life that haven't aged well, Sandy?
That have not aged well?
Yeah. For me, it's organized religion, for one thing.
Well, that's a spectacular question. What is not aged well? Some of my core beliefs of what family was supposed to be.
Oh.
Some of the naive notions that I had about even myself and what I expected of myself or what was expected of me as a woman, as a young woman, as a woman wanting to be independent and yet loved and cared for. who I am to my family hasn't aged well in what I thought it would secure or continue as. Who I am and how I feel about politics has not aged well. And that started in watching the assassination of President Kennedy. And I can say that becoming spiritually, the age, how do we acquire age, is that moment I was in high school and heard that he was assassinated. And I was walking the halls of school and walked by and looked at my art teacher, and I said, President Kennedy. I said, the president just got shot. And he goes, Lincoln died, blah, 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 blah. And I said, no, President Kennedy. It was the absolute aging of my heart because I loved President Kennedy as a young girl. He was Catholic. He was handsome. He had charisma. President Eisenhower was the old guy from the military, and Amy Eisenhower didn't look like Jackie Kennedy. And so I became shocked in such a way that it aged me in the art of, or didn't age well, because I then did not vote at all until Obama.
Wow.
Yep. It was something that I thought I could not do because it didn't matter after Kennedy. Then it was like there was all the people that were like corrupt or didn't make it or died. I mean, the presidency just fell apart. And then with Nixon, and I mean, it was years and years and years. In the Vietnam War, what did not age well for me was the respect for war as truly holding the hearts of a nation close to the heart of the soldier to go out and take care of us. When it was my peer group going out there and saying, this is a dirty war. This is not an honorable war. Something's different. And them coming back and not being loved. My father came back and he was loved as a World War II sailor. And my first husband came back and was so disrespected as a Navy man from Vietnam, and there was no identity. It aged us, and I did not age well because there was no embrace. There was no celebration. There was such shame. And I know it killed the soul of my husband and so many of my peers at that age. That was a spiritual aging that did not age well. Trust in the thought of we're safe. I think that part of the horror of Kennedy was that if they could shoot our president, were we secure at all? It aged me in a fact of knowing I didn't know enough to choose. I didn't know enough to say this person is a good person or a bad person or the right person, because there was so much exposure of so many things. How about you?
Well, for me, it goes back again to organized religion.
Mm-hmm.
And, growing up as a young girl, very dutiful and catechism and all of those sorts of things, and understanding or being told, not really understanding, but being told certain things about life and about death and all of those morality sorts of things, and belonging exclusively to what I now call I refer to religions, organized religions, as country clubs with their own set of policies and do's and don'ts and
Mm-hmm.
membership fees and all of that kind of a thing. And for me, I remember shortly after my first communion, I mean, how old are we when that happens? 8 years old. And sitting on the steps of the church there at Schofield Barracks, and a GI walking up and exposing himself to me there on the steps of the church.
Oh, that's delightful.
Yeah. And I remember in my mind at that moment something shifting about holy spaces.
Yes.
Right? And over the course of time, wishing and hoping that the country club that I belonged to was a good and safe space, only to find out that, not across the board, of course, but in due course, finding out that it simply wasn't so.
Right.
And it isn't so. And I was really stuck on this thought because earlier tonight I was having a conversation with a dear friend of mine who is right now at a vigil in downtown Grand Rapids for the beautiful souls that were murdered in Denver, Colorado.
Spectacular. Thank you.
Last weekend. And so he was on his way to the vigil. And because I had asked him if he had heard about the documentary that is out called 1946. And he's going to join us on Sunday evening here at our home. We're going to watch the documentary 1946, which is about how the word homosexual was introduced to the Bible in 1946. For a whole lot of political and powerful reasons, right?
Right.
And so, sitting, preparing for tonight's show, and talking about spiritual aging, grappling with that has aged me. And not necessarily in hard-edged ways, but in wise ways. Mm-hmm. Because had none of that ever happened, whether it was the priests that were molesting children and all of that was revealed, etc., what have you, I would not probably have looked so hard outside of.
Mm-hmm.
But it did age me. It aged my heart. It aged my way of thinking about my place in the world and the way the world runs and who runs the world and what spirit really is and who spirit really is.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Well, yes, because for me with the church, I developed a crust and kind of took on the attitude of when I went to get married and went to the priest at the Catholic Church that I was devoted to for my whole life, the upbringing, even though I started to question it as soon as I got hormonal or, had to go in and confess sins that I didn't have. I hadn't made, but you need something. So
you make something up, yeah.
And then when it was like they were challenging me in, am I a good enough person as a teenager? And it was like, I am good. Why am I being challenged? Mm-hmm. So when I went to ask about getting married in the church already said to me right there and then, my husband will not be honored, nor will my children be honored in the Catholic Church. I would not be able to be married at the altar and it was, and I literally said, so the Catholic God denies love if I don't marry a Catholic man and have Catholic children? And I walked out of the church. Mm-hmm. How that aged me was I didn't have something else to go to yet. Mm-hmm. I knew that there were other religions that were different from us, but as a Catholic, you weren't really allowed to go to other religions because I think they didn't want you to know that there was another way of believing in God or being spared
right.
having to, go to confession. and I say that tongue in cheek, but there's that place of it sucker punched me to find out that Catholicism in 1969 had no humanity at the altar. And I was stunned. It made me grow up. It made me spin on my heels. And it made me wonder, well, then where will I be blessed and holy?
Right.
So like you, it started to actually age a little girl that just assumed my loyalty to Catholicism was right for everybody. I didn't know that Catholicism was bigoted. Truly bigoted.
Susan Q. Brown is in the chat room along with, Holly and Lady Hawk and Cindy and Sally, Tara, Lily, Kelly, Carla, Joe. I mean, it's this wonderful group of women in the chat room. It's so good to have you all. And Susan is saying, oh my God, this episode is deep even for you two. Fantastic.
See what age does?
Yeah. Lady Hawk is saying, my daughter was told she would go to hell if she had the hysterectomy due to cancer. Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. It is. And so either, and some people become, I think, stunted. You either, grow beyond that, or you remain stunted in your beliefs out of fear or what have you. And for me, that aging process, as I said, it forced me to look outside of and investigate more fully. You know that I'm a vociferous reader and researcher and all of that kind of a thing. It's just in my nature to be that. And as I'm saying this, the beautiful irony of it all is that I'm sitting here looking at my altar that's in front of me, not my ancestral altar, but the altar in front of me has a magnificent portrait of Mary Magdalene and a beautiful sculpture of the Holy Mother, right? And I've got incense going and this beautiful portrait. I purchased this one in Egypt. I was probably with Tara at the time, of the Sacred Heart, right? And so I'm looking at all of that. But what I investigated, beyond being a member of the club or of a sect or a cult, call it what you will, the cult of Christ, what I began to investigate was, the roots of spirituality, or the roots of spirituality, or the roots of our connection to creation and the organic aspects of it. And I think that with spiritual aging, you learn that we're all human, and that includes whether you're wearing a collar or not, right? We're all human, and there's more to the story.
Right.
And I think that that's part of spiritual aging, is understanding there's more to the story, and for me, wanting to find out what the more of the story is.
Right. For me, and again, we have that 15-year age difference. For me, when I left the church, got married, got divorced, it all happened really, really fast. And just as I separated, I got into mind dynamics. I am not an avid reader. Everything that I have ever experienced, I'll read for pleasure. I'm not a scientist, nor am I a good student. It's too agonizing because of my left brain deficiency. And so everything that I have explored is from my gut, my instinct, and literally that way that spirit pivoted me into, come on over here. Come on over here. Just keep coming. Just keep coming. And I have to say that, and there's the goosebumps on my goosebumps, is that when you said the spiritual companions, the spiritual family, it was significant for me to realize that there was a spiritual family waiting for me to notice them, waiting for me to be aware of their existence and that I was welcomed and truly did belong. The little bit of reading that I did highlighted the possibility of these things, but the experience of going into the psychological framework of the beginnings of psychospiritual work back in the 70s when it was just beginning, I am grateful that that intuition of my need to know and experience the depth of emotion, why we think and feel a certain way. I was done with religious matters, and I was now intuitively drawn to just that place of, well, what's metaphysics, or what's mysticism, or what's a channeler, or what, I mean, because it was available. And it's where I stumbled when I went to Mind Dynamics. Oh, we're doing metaphysical things, but it wasn't even addressed as that the way it is now. So I have to be blatantly honest and tell everybody I am beyond lucky that I was caught. That makes me want to cry, because I'm always caught. That is the gift of this spiritual orb that I live in my own nuances of just facing life, being willing to go out in it, kicking and screaming or arms open wide, that whole nucleus of the spiritual family, with the quote-unquote initiation through Sir Charles, to really say, there's a father figure here. There's an ally here. That my first spiritual teachers, when I was learning, they were teaching herbs and, really grassroots kind of, well, if you do this and garden, da, da, da. And my teacher said to me, Sandy, you're not going to work with herbs. You're going to work with spirit. And it was like, I didn't even understand the difference. Mm-hmm. And I made it. It was like, well, I don't know what you mean. Mm-hmm. And it was what was coming. It was what will be. And then working with Gene Houston and Robert Masters, and you talk about growing up the hard way, finding out that I, oh my God, I'm blessed by meeting these people and cursed by meeting these people. Mm-hmm. That aging is the innocence of thinking, oh my God, someone discovered me, and it's like, run, they're going to suck you fucking dry. Mm-hmm. And you age because you realize there's no place safe except within yourself. And so that spiritual space.
And so at what age, Sandy, did you decide that, misogyny within spirituality was no longer going to be, was no longer palatable to you, or something that you were willing to endure, or fraudulence in spirituality? In other words, at what point and what age did you finally say, I'm going to remain authentic to who I am, rather than worship at the feet of, as you just said, supposed gurus or masters, and not worry about what people in your family or maybe clients, et cetera, would feel about exercising and living your true, and for lack of a better term, your authenticity?
Well, I can tell you the exact moment the first time happened, and I was literally 14 years old in that place right there. And our church was being remodeled, and we got relocated, and my mother was sick, and we had 7 kids, and I'm old, and just too much chaos. And it was in the days when you didn't have 4 cars in the backyard. You just had one, and if you were lucky, somebody was old enough to drive it. And we didn't get to church every weekend. And I went to confession, and in the confessional, it was, one of my sins was I missed church on Sunday. The priest in that moment said, how many times? Well, it was enough for me not to remember, and I didn't even care. It was like, I'm telling you, I missed it. I mean, I'm not like, oh oh my God. And I realized, and I literally said, I don't know. And he said, how many times? And I said, I really don't know. It's been a while. He said, tell me how many times. In that moment, I felt this had nothing to do with anything except some man on the other side wanting to dominate a young girl.
Mm-hmm.
And to shame her, make her blind. And this is exactly what I did. In that moment, that Scorpio bitch inside me whiplashed right in and went, okay, God, this is between you and me. I'm going to lie to this guy so I can get out of here.
I love it.
I mean, that's pretty much the quote, you know? And it was like, I made the sign of the cross to make it look like I was worried, but it was like, that's between me and him, and that never again. And I literally said, well, let me see. I lied through my teeth. He gave me penance that was like I was praying until I got communion the next day. And that was it. I never went again from that space of I want to receive the host to feel closer to God. In that moment, everything was over. The whole thing was a manipulation. And that's the first time that I felt my identity stand up to an arrogance, not an authority I feared would keep me from God. It was the arrogance that had no idea of how deeply I had a relationship with God, and they weren't going to take it away from me.
Mm-hmm.
That was that I became karmically that woman that was like, no, you know, you ain't my daddy. And it's that place of the first marker. And then I think what we're talking about tonight is spiritual aging, is those moments of acquiring myself or feeling my need to have myself happened throughout many chaotic, painful, grueling moments, and also some star-studded moments that allowed me to know I'm old enough to put my ankles in the air and not worry about something. I'm old enough to get an apartment and not tell my mother what I'm doing. I'm old enough to date certain people that my mother wouldn't approve of. I'm old enough. It's like, oops, I'm a little too young to be doing this. I better get back home. So I think the misogyny is also that place of going to work and realizing when I was 24 years old that sex was part of the barter. And I played with it, knowing that sex was part of the barter. But then it was like, there's a difference between feeling like you're sexy and feeling like you're used. And that happened at work. And that again was like, you know what? I'd rather quit than give you a blowjob. And I can't be more blunt.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that I could say no to people that assumed I couldn't even get out of the room and that they were entitled to it. And there's that aging of allowing me to know I was finding out who I was in a way that, thank God, I had the stability to hold my own and get out of the room, get away from, leave the job, and not be shamed by, oh my God, if I don't do this, I have nothing else. But I have to say, a lot of women do that in their marriage, and they don't know how to get out, or when they realize that is their marriage, they run.
Mm-hmm.
So my lots of places, Dana, lots and lots of places. And it really did have a lot to do within my spirituality of I'm still a holy woman, even if I'm a sexual woman. I'm still a sacred woman, even if I don't know the laws of what religions are. I didn't feel I had to be well read, even though I felt crippled that I know I didn't know. I had to grow up when the Christians came after me, and I got ordained. Who are you? What are you doing? And to know that, listen, I just got ordained, but I didn't do it by studying. I did it because I lived a life and someone said you need to be ordained. So even being able to develop the attitude that I'm blessed with something, but I don't know exactly what to do with it. And I personally had to stand up for it, even with myself. How about you?
Well, for me, one of the most pivotal points in knowing that if I wanted to age, period, if I wanted to age, I needed to find somebody who could talk to me about the fact that I can see dead people.
Right.
And that I could see spirits. And right. It had come to the point of life or death.
Right.
And having the conversation with Steve and saying, if I don't find somebody who can explain all of this to me. Father Cussler did a really good job when I was 15, and that was a precursor. He was a wonderful influence in my life. But I needed to talk to somebody because my walk with spirit is my life.
Right.
And everything else is pertinent to it or part of my life.
Ingredients, but
the walk with spirit is who I am. It's why I'm here.
Exactly.
And knowing that once I explored it, I would never be able to walk away from it.
Right.
And that was a decision that I made when I decided to go visit Sonia Choquette at her home in Chicago 31 years ago, right. And sat in her living room with her. And subsequently meeting with my spiritual director at the Dominican Center to talk about these things. But I knew that in that moment, no matter who I would stay married to, who I would ever marry or not marry, that this way of being is my being.
Right.
And it has over the years embarrassed my kids. When I'll never forget being at an equestrian event with Elise. And of course, I was always the favorite mom. As you know, you've been at my house when there were 1 million kids all over my home. But she would say to me, Mom, please don't talk about that stuff, okay? Because Stephanie, right. Blah, blah, blah. And I would agree with her because I understood that she was at a certain age and development in her own way of being. But I also did not become the opposite of it in front of people to make them comfortable, if that makes sense. It is who I am.
Absolutely. There's the beauty of, again, I didn't have children, so I didn't have to protect them or even direct them. But in my family, and I mean, I started teaching at 23 years old. So it was that place of being able to know that when spirit sat me down, and I knew that I'm not going to be a mother, I'm not going to be a wife, I'm not going to be the person that I thought I was going to be and I was brought up to be. Talk about aging. There was no way for me to live in my hometown with the incredible amount of spirituality that I was being exposed to and craving. Because I too craved my life in spirituality. I just didn't even know that that's what it was. Mm-hmm. It was the psychicness. You had your person in Chicago. Mine was Marcy Seidel and Eva and Jean Grant. And, again, the blessing is Marcy Seidel was a trance medium, and she's the one that introduced me to Sir Charles. And I went out of curiosity. When I took Mind Dynamics, I went out of, I want to know something about when somebody lies to me. I didn't know I was going to get this psychic development. So when I went, something happened to me that allowed me to be prepared to age, to develop, to acquire a stride, to come out of my innocence and into my gift, my talents, or my study of the psychological, spiritual, the ability to do readings.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that my desire to be accepted was truly part of that yearning of, this is who I am. How am I going to make it work? This is what I do. How am I going to make a life out of this?
Mm-hmm.
This is what I do. There was, how do you get clients, or how do you make money, and how do you charge? So aging was also feeling a certain sophistication of quality to qualify myself to even say I was worth paying. That developing that age, that trust of, I do this, you want it, I charge you, it's going to be my life. How do I do that? I had no teachers for that. It was a stumbling. And what happened was people came to me and said, we'll pay you this. And it's like, okay. And it was way more an hour than anybody else was getting by going to a 9-to-5 job. But it's that beauty of knowing, and this does bring me to that emotion. Always, Spirit has been in front of me and behind me, kind of like holding the hands of a toddler and just saying, wherever you stumble, we'll always support you in getting back up. But you have to fall without shame, even when you're ashamed. We're going to help you get back up.
Mm-hmm.
I never got back up alone, Dana.
Mm-hmm.
Ever.
Mm-hmm.
But I fell alone.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I was with the crowd when I fell. They're just like, oh, there she goes. That was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be a while here.
Mm-hmm.
And aging, when I fell, not just down the dark hole, but into the emptiness of not knowing if I could survive. Like with you, this is killing me. Being who I am was killing me.
Mm-hmm.
I had to age in order to grow up from even fearing who I was and
Mm-hmm.
figure it. Really, and knowing that it wasn't always just going to come. I had to meet it.
Right.
I had to get the respect of knowing I have earned the right to be here. I'm not entitled to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was really part of, even with criticism from men and women or authority and everything, it was not just given to me. I had to earn it.
Right.
And that gave, and I was old enough to be who I was when I was 35. It was like, I've got some cred. I've got some miles on me. Even though I had already been doing the work for 15 years. Mm-hmm. When I turned 35, I felt my spiritual age as a woman. I had a stride. I could speak to crowds. I was giving lectures. I was traveling the world. And I had I think the best way I could say is I had a confidence I didn't have at 34. The second I turned 35, it was there.
Hmm.
And that was a very different engagement.
Mm-hmm.
Crap still hit the walls, and
Mm-hmm.
trouble was way out in the horizon. But at least I felt old enough to find what was new and go on to the next adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you?
Well, I think for me, I feel for me, you know how you can look back on your life and you can measure by things that happen in your life where life changed.
Right.
And you matured, or maybe it really aged you, or as you said earlier, elevated you. I remember one of the most poignant moments for me of realizing that I had undergone some aging, or maybe some saging, was the very first time that I received a phone call from someone who had been referred to me by a Catholic priest.
Oh, wow. Talk about validating.
Right. But the reason she was referred to me by a Catholic priest was because she was in need of an exorcism.
Oh, all right.
And the priest had attempted it, and it only made matters worse. And in fact, I was sitting right here at this desk in front of this altar when the phone call came in. And I agreed to help this woman and the child who was in need. And I remember sitting at this very spot and thinking to myself, I could feel my bones, like my spiritual bones, creaking because they were growing.
Right.
And the other part of it, the more significant part of it for me, was that Spirit felt that I was ready.
Right.
I mean, it was nice that the Padre felt that I was ready, and, he made a trip to the Vatican to get special oils, and it all, went to hell in a handbasket when he tried it. So, here, call her.
Right.
And that's marvelous. But what really got me in that moment was that Spirit feels I'm ready. How much do I trust Spirit?
Right.
And agree that I'm ready? Well, I had learned to trust Spirit long decades prior to that. And in that moment, I said, okay,
right.
If you feel I'm ready, we will do this together.
Exactly.
That was a pivotal moment of aging for me, spiritual aging.
Right. Can I ask, what was the texture of the aging, Dana?
It was internal, and it felt ancient.
There you go.
Like the ancientness of me was being called out of the temple in Egypt to perform this rite.
Right.
And it had happened, and it has happened subsequent to that, same sort of thing. But that one was my ancientness tapping me on my shoulder.
Yes.
And whenever that happens, I'm always curious about what's going to be next.
Right.
As I'm looking at this beautiful piece of artwork that I just purchased in New Orleans of Marie Laveau, right? I've got this beautiful piece sitting here on my desk.
Right.
Yeah.
God bless the mother.
Exactly. And where does it take you? Where is it going to take me? And my curiosity is always an inspiration for me.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's that beauty of when you speak of Egypt. I know when we first met, you were off to Egypt, and I was in envy because you were going to go into the tomb and whatnot, and I didn't know how I was going to get to Egypt, even though when I first started and I was with Gene Houston and Robert Masters, he asked if I could, go in and see if I could contact Sekhmet, and it's like, my bravado was like, yeah, sure. And the experience that I had in that journey with Sekhmet, which is the body of a female and the head of a lioness, was the first time that I experienced the crustation of my spirituality, where something ancient, something feral, something primal came and brought me into, and I'm 26 at this point, into her domain, and literally said to me, I'm bringing you in, and you are to tell this man nothing. That he asked me to do something I didn't know I could do or was, even affiliated with. But when I walked into, he and Gene Houston took me up through their house, and they had artifacts from Egypt that were breathtaking, even a sarcophagus with a mummy and, statues of Sekhmet on their altar, their fireplace in their bedroom, that when I walked in and walked past, I swooned, literally swooned. And to have Egypt call me, even though I had a romantic notion about it in my 20s, I had a spiritual encounter with it when I was in 6th grade and went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. All I can say is that when I was in 6th grade and saw Sekhmet, it was that beacon of, I'm going to see you later, and you remember me. I'm going to see you later, and you remember me. I was enchanted. And then to be in front of all of these artifacts of her and swoon, I didn't get the connection until way later. Like, oh my God, I have a fantasy of Egypt, but to know that Egypt and I have a relationship, a process of spiritually aging me, qualifying me, or anointing me, or even better than that, I could say allowing me to catch up to myself, to be who I am, and then to proceed.
Mm-hmm.
And meeting Sekhmet in that meditation, in that process, gave me a certain sense of loyalty that I didn't know was going to alter my life forever. When she said, do not say anything about what you did when I came out, he said, did you go in? I said, yes. And he goes, well, where did you go? And I said, she said for me not to say anything. And all hell broke loose, and I ended up going to California and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's a very big story, but the beauty of it is my loyalty to her out of the innocence of realizing something in this bond was here that she reminded me of and actually challenged me, because the woman that I was sharing the moment with, her name was Sandra, mine Sandy, and it was not wasted on me that she had dark hair, I had blonde hair. It was like, what's the opposites here? And we're both going to be doing this thing for this man. And she was babbling on about her experience, and I was in lockdown with, I made the promise to say no. And in making that promise, I aged because I qualified to be seen as loyal. And I didn't even know it, Dana, but I felt it, because then I got very challenged.
Mm-hmm.
My loyalty to spirit to this day is of that same octave.
Yes.
You've seen it. My client's seen it. My life sees it. I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And even, wanted to give up and go, enough, mercy, I'm done. Give me a break. They'll go, well, you can have a break, but it ain't over.
Exactly.
And you may break, but it ain't over.
Yeah.
What got to? You want to see age? Wait until you see your face tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. And don't you find, Sandy, that with spiritual aging, you learn to, in some ways, go more with the roll with the flow, and in other ways, I'll speak for myself. In some ways, I've learned to go more, roll with the flow, and let things kind of roll off my back. And in other ways, I'm much more quick to call bullshit.
Right. But that's the stamina of knowing that you don't fear the loss of yourself.
Right.
You may lose a lot of people calling bullshit, but you're not going to lose yourself.
Exactly.
Unless you're attached to the people you're losing.
Exactly. I think that's one of the grandest things. Yeah, I think it's one of the grandest things about aging and spiritual aging is to call bullshit when you see it. And, whatever label people have put on me, or labels that people have put on me over the years, and there are many, as you know.
Who's called you a name? I'm going to go visit them.
Yeah, exactly. So, but, eventually with spiritual aging, you understand that those are labels and names, et cetera, and you know who you are. And you know that this life is so fleeting.
Yes.
And we've all been given a voice.
Yes.
To help make a difference in this world.
Yes.
And as you know, I've never shied away from raising my voice to societal things.
I have. If I felt endangered, again, I come from another generation where, if a woman opened her mouth, she got slapped, if not beaten.
Oh.
So, that's from being a kid on. And, I'm glad I still have teeth, because there was a lot of stuff that went down. And I was beaten as a wife, and I was persecuted as an employee, and I was fired, and, I've been tossed to the side of the road. So there's that place of knowing that my mouth has gotten me in trouble. And every once in a while, Spirit would go, you may want to be quiet on this one, Sandy. Like, at least take a pause. So aging spiritually also is learning the gift of discernment.
Yeah, discernment is definitely always key, and learning it. And sometimes learning to give grace. Yes. To other people and to ourselves, giving myself grace.
Right.
And learning to give grace to other people. But in learning to give grace to myself, accepting that sometimes, enough is enough.
Oh, yeah. When it's over, my mouth doesn't shut up. But it's like I've learned navigate a little bit. If I know it, say it. If I don't, take inventory.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean something won't come. It means I don't have to know everything in the moment, get more information, or be certain that the consequences as soon as you open your mouth are never, ever, ever going to be removed from you. You're going to have to go through it.
Exactly. Tara, Sally first says, wow, thank you both for sharing your stories with this particular focus. It really resonates with me at this time. And Tara, thank you for that, Sally. And Tara is saying, very true about the older you get, spiritually or physically, the less tolerance you have for bullshit or the people who dish it out. That,
right.
Yeah.
There's, and I want to be able to offer some wisdom here with, you also have to see, what is it you're about to lose? Can you afford to lose it? What do you know you're sacrificing? Are you able to make the sacrifice? Do you stand your ground because you're defiant? Or do you stand your ground because you're wise? Or do you stand your ground because you have enough money to take care of business no matter what's going to happen? It's, sometimes my ricochet is fast, but there's also in the discernment now of what's going to happen with the fallout. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's like, if it's just me, fine. If it's not just me, what are the consequences of that? And believe me, oh my God, it's like, I don't always know that I've opened my mouth as God opened and spoke. I didn't know that people were not wanting me to say something or bring something up. I didn't know it was going to change my life for speaking. And I think that's part of aging too, is to be in the surprise of, we can't always know when we are being brave or bold or forward or even secure. Because, in all due respect, the last time I felt truly secure in my own bravado with my family, I lost my family because I spoke up, I laughed, I told a story, and that was I didn't know I wasn't supposed to tell this story. I didn't know that, what do you mean? And when I was challenged by it, it was like, you know what? I get it. You don't like my history, but it's my history, and I'm not going to erase it for you. I will not change my story for you, but I realized that my story just changed my life again. And so there's grief with that. Let's be very honest.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes with growth and aging, there's deep grief.
With aging, there is deep grief because you've lived long enough to lose.
Right. And
go ahead.
To your point about, being discerning, as the president of a nonprofit, a 501c3, I'm not supposed to be out there talking about politics. And trust me, there are lots of times and lots of memes I'd like to, share, and thoughts and podcasts and all of that about, my thoughts and viewpoints. But because I run a charitable 501c3 tax exempt, I can't.
Right.
I could lose it. And churches supposedly also, right, are not supposed to be.
You wouldn't know that about anybody down south. I'm sorry, but there I go.
Yeah. So you're right about that. So sometimes, as much as something could be on the tip of my tongue and I just like to, in a public way, I can't. And so I have to be discerning about what it is that I can say and still keep my foundation healthy. So you're right about that. That's a great point.
The deeper truth is you can, but you know the consequences of the loss.
Exactly. And it's too great for me.
It's too great. So you're choosing to, I have opinions, and interestingly enough, they're not as important as the way you're living your life, serving other people, that those opinions aren't serving those people, or even the politics aren't serving those people.
Right.
You are.
Right.
And so there you are to your loyalty.
Right.
You're loyal to, wait a second, nobody's going to take care of them if I speak about something that I'm angry that's not taking care of them.
Exactly. So you're right. Discernment really is, to your point about that. I wanted to point that out.
Absolutely. And that is aging in the spiritual way of, where your heart belongs, your passion belongs. Your anger may belong to a whole bunch of stuff. But I mean, you are Scorpio. I've watched it in action. It's fine with me. And it's that place of knowing that, thank you. Is your husband chuckling?
Yes, he's over chuckling and shaking his head. He doesn't know what you're talking about.
Right, Todd, sure. Let me get New York on you.
Yeah.
So it's that place of you're also angry enough not to have you be fooled into losing what you love.
Right.
Because that seduction is always there.
Exactly. Which, by the way, if I could, speaking of my foundation, it's winter and it's cold. And Gathering Thunder just shipped a beautiful bunch of gorgeous Native American blankets and hats and things out to the Navajo reservation for the Diné elders. That, I think, was shipped out today. Because, our Diné elders out on the Navajo reservation in New Mexico, many of them still have to go get their own water. Right? They don't have plumbing. They have to do that. It's getting cold. So we're sending blankets and hats and all of those good things, really warm stockings out to them. They're on their way out to New Mexico. And here in Grand Rapids, we're getting ready to assist over 60 elders with blankets and warm gloves and all of those kinds of things because it's cold. So if anyone is so inclined,
and the government is not taking care of them.
No, that's a whole other, there we go again. So if anyone, would like to make a contribution to Gathering Thunder Foundation, or if you are an Amazon shopper, if you become an Amazon Smile, so you go to amazonsmile.com and you choose Gathering Thunder Foundation as your charity of choice, Gathering Thunder Foundation gets a percentage of everything that you purchase throughout the holiday season. So that's my plug for my for my passion, Gathering Thunder Foundation. So, and thank you to everybody who contributed to my birthday fundraiser on Facebook, because it raised a lot of money for the youth and their families here at the Native American Education Program for the Christmas program. So thank you for that.
I will send my check in the mail as of tomorrow.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Every year, at least, I make sure something gets over there.
Yes, you do. Yep.
There's a beauty here, and I want to thank you for being a part of this spearhead to take care of the elders. For me, it is amazing that even though we age spiritually, it doesn't always mean we're safe.
Right.
And, or, I'm sure there are wise elders out there that still need the care of those younger ones that are vital and strong and looking to give, to receive from them, because their lives have such value.
Right.
So I want to honor their aging and their wisdom that should not be wasted.
Exactly. So with that, Sandy, we're past the top of the hour.
Okie dokie.
And thank you for aging with me.
It's always a pleasure. It ain't over until it's over, and then I'll see you on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. It's never dull.
No. What are you going to do tomorrow? What are you eating?
Well, the usual obligatory things, and Kelly is making some wonderful greens.
Great.
So we're looking forward to that.
Good.
Yeah, even in today, a friend stopped by. She was here for a bit, and we got to talking about Thanksgiving, and I said, even in my spiritual aging, it's not about the pilgrims and all of that legend, that sort of a thing. But in our household, it really has turned into a day of giving thanks, a day of gratitude. Yeah. So.
Well, that's what we are. We were in the hospital today, and we have been invited out for tomorrow. And the question was simple. Are we safe? Is Bob safe to socialize yet? And they looked us right in the face and said, not yet.
Aww.
Not yet. And it was like, you know what? I'm glad we asked. And when we called our hostess, it's like they're going to deliver food at 4.
Aww.
It's there's that place of when it's time to go out and it's really safe. I mean, I'll be able to travel again soon, maybe if blah, blah, blah. But there's been this cocoon that Bobby and I have lived in because of his illness. And it's amazing how in our spirituality, that cocoon has saved his life.
Yeah.
And I can't be any more dramatic than saying this cocoon has saved his life. And he and I spoke of it today when I literally looked at him and said, to receive the fact that you are cancer free, it's going to take time to go inside me because I've aged, knowing that I was told you're going to die.
Yes.
To hear that you're going to live is also going to age me for all sorts of other reasons. But to reverse that diagnosis, that life sentence, and to know that something else is happening, it's a preciousness that if we blow it now, we're idiots. And so to stay calm, to stay close, to stay harbored, to stay in sanctuary and be grateful, I think it's a great day for he and I to just be in the company of our own little cocoon and be grateful for Spirit for holding us through this in ways that all of you have participated. But he and I have been on our knees, heads bowed, on our knees, even when our fists are in the air raging. And I am grateful to know that. And I said it to him tonight. We were having dinner in bed before the show, and I just looked at him and I said, thank you for staying alive. So, to all of us, thank you for staying alive.
Thank you.
Okay. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Dream well and be well, everyone.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Good night, Dana. Good night, Todd. Bye, Lily.